Welcome to Inspired Living with Mark and Kim. Every Wednesday, Mark and Kim, along with their special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Mark and Kim will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience, and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Mark and Kim are tested, certified, and professional spiritual mediums, metaphysical teachers, healers, and spiritual advisors with their own individual spiritual practices in Seattle, Washington, and Los Angeles, California. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Hello, 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 inspired listeners. It is Wisdom Wednesday. If you've joined us before, you know this is the place to be for all interesting topics, whether it's based on meditation, metaphysics, mindfulness. Today we're going to be talking about Part 2, A Traveler's Guide to the Afterlife, Tradition, Beliefs on Death, Dying, and What Lies Beyond. Again, it's going to be a fascinating show. I just did a Facebook Live and an Instagram Live video, so you can click on that link and join us right now from anywhere around the world. And just thank you so much for being one of our inspired listeners and being part of the inspired listening community. My name is Mark Lanehart, the Intuitive Prospector. I am your co-host here in Seattle, Washington, or the beautiful Pacific Northwest. I hope that you had a fabulous 4th of July. And again, just thank you so much for joining us today on Inspired Living Radio with Mark and Kim here on OMTimes Radio. If you want to learn about the work I'm doing here in Seattle, please visit my website at marklanehart.com. You can do an internet search for the Intuitive Prospector. I would love to go out and do a little spiritual prospecting for your own spiritual gold. And joining me all the way across the country every Wisdom Wednesday is my lovely co-host, Kim Falcon, founder of Love First. Hi, Kim.
So happy to have you with us. It is a beautiful, rainy day here in Virginia. The weather changes so frequently you can't keep up. But I hope everybody had a beautiful weekend, 4th of July. I know we saw some really just great fireworks. It was just nice to...
Yeah, as a... spiritual practice. Oh, we're kind of losing you there, Kim. You're kind of cutting in and out here. Hopefully we can get a better feed on the signal here. But I know what you're saying on the fireworks. As a retired firefighter, this 4th of July was actually one of my worst days of being on duty with all the fireworks. So we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with Kim's connection here. Just want to make sure that we have Mark on the line as well. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I also have trouble hearing her as well, but I hope you hear me clearly.
Oh, so strange.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. There we go. Kim, are you there?
Can you hear me now? Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, it's just like the commercial.
Yay.
We can hear you now. give it one more time. Go one more time with it.
Can you hear me now? Well, I am so glad to be here. Okay, yes, I'm just repeating that I'm very glad to be here as I am every Wednesday. This is just an hour that I look forward to. I do have a spiritual practice, Love First, where life transformations happen in the beautiful state of Virginia and also California and Richmond and Encino. And I work with clients domestically all over the world, and the goal is always to raise consciousness. If I can help you to transform your life so that you can heal what's needed and move forward living the life you're meant to live of joy, if I could help you through readings, energy healings, or using the power of your mind with hypnosis, you can find me at lovefirst.info. I would love to work with you. I really am passionate about the work that I do, and I love the clients I work with. I do have a couple of announcements coming up. I am going to be doing readings at the Alchemist Bookstore at Stony Point Fashion Center in Richmond from 12 to 6. So if you're interested in having a reading, sign up now. I think those spaces fill up pretty quickly when I'm there. And I'd just love to meet you in person if you want to stop by and say hi. I'm also going to be at the Healers Village Expo as a vendor there, participating in a health and wellness expo in Virginia Beach on August 12th and 13th. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to my events page on lovefirst.info, my website. And I would just love to stay connected with you through my newsletter. If you're interested in signing up for my newsletter, you can do that, lovefirst.info, and receive a free gift. Yay! You can also find us on Facebook under Inspired Living Radio, Twitter and Instagram under Inspired for Us, Google Plus, Inspired Living with Mark and Kim. And this is where you can interact with us. You can find out about our upcoming shows, and also the videos that sometimes Mark and I post in the interim as well. And you can send through your questions on social media for our shows. You can also listen to all of our archives on OMTimes Radio, Podbean, SoundCloud, marklanehardt.com, YouTube, iTunes, and lovefirst.info. And you can call in live with your questions every week on every show, no matter what the topic is. Or if you've got questions for Mark or myself or our guests, you can do that at 202-570-7057. Every month we have a new inspired affirmation for the month. And so for this month, the month of July, it is I can tap into a wellspring of inner happiness anytime I wish. There you go. That's a good one to rewire the brain with. So it reminds us that there is happiness within us that we can access at any time. Back to you, Mark.
Yep. Anytime I wish, huh? That happiness is right inside there, huh?
Anytime I wish. Yes, that stream of well-being is always available.
I love it. I love the affirmation, and I just love how our show continues to grow. And again, Kim and I love doing radio because it's our way to give back and also interview interesting people from around the world doing amazing work. And we get to learn so much from doing radio, don't we, Kim?
We sure do. I tell you, every week it's like we're learning all kinds of stuff every week.
So let's keep the learning hat on, and let's move forward into part 2. This is a guest that we had back on in early May, Mark Mirabello, and he wrote a book called A Traveler's Guide to the Afterlife. I know that he's on the line, so we have a good connection there. But his book was really drawing on death and afterlife traditions from cultures all around the world. Mark explores the many forms of existence beyond death and each tradition's instructions to access the afterlife. I've read the book. It's a fascinating book, and it just examines all the different cultural beliefs all around the world. The book, he examines the beliefs on the soul, heaven, hell, reincarnation, the wisdom from books of the dead, such as the Book of Going Forth by Day from Egypt, the Katha Upanishad from India, the Bardo Thodol from Tibet, the Golden Orphic Tablets from Greece, Lieh Tzu from China, and Heaven and Its Wonders and Hell from Things Heard and Seen from the 18th century Europe. So, considering the question, what is death? Mark provides answers from a wide range of ancient and modern thinkers, including scientist Nicholas Maxwell, the seer Emanuel Swedenborg, and I know him from my spiritual studies, first century Buddhist philosopher Narga-Una, and Greek philosopher Euphides, who I don't know how to say that. Am I saying these names right, Mark, or am I just killing them?
Well, close enough.
Okay.
Are you referring to Euripides there? You were making a comment about that we may be already dead?
Yes, exactly. I wasn't sure I was saying the name right. So, but just a lot of different research that has gone into this book, and I know that you're a professor at Sewanee State University in Ohio there, and just want to welcome you back to part 2 of this fascinating topic, and I'll kind of let you pick it up because we didn't get a chance to get through all of the questions last time, and we wanted to we had some questions after the show that came through from some of our inspired listeners, so we want to get right into that, and we're going to be coming up on our first break in a few minutes, but just reintroduce yourself to the inspired listening community all around the world out there, and let's talk about your book.
Yes, thank you. Oh, by the way, not to delay things, but when you mention pronunciation, we all make that mistake. I've been lecturing for years, and we all do this. It reminds me, the British, it's a sign of being really elite when you devise your own pronunciation. I remember Lord Kenneth Clark always used to refer to capitalism as opposed to capitalism. So again, we've all done this. And but I'm a professor at a small Midwestern university, Shawnee State University, along the Ohio River. My education is both in the United States and in Great Britain. I went to the University of Virginia in the United States, Thomas Jefferson's place, and an old medieval school originally, University of Glasgow in Scotland, 1451 establishment. And frankly, It was at Glasgow because probably in Scotland it's so far north and the sun creates shadows constantly. There's always a sense of being in a haunted atmosphere when you're in a place like Scotland. Beautiful country, damp, cold. When the sun comes out, everybody celebrates. It's such a rare occurrence. But this particular work, I've been reading information on afterlife concepts virtually my entire life, but got really intensively involved in 2007 after my second parent passed away. My mother passed away from cancer years ago, and my father passed away in 2007, sadly. And it's the ultimate question. And what always struck me about our culture, since we're a scientific culture, we tend to denigrate everything that's not matter or energy, and indeed even deny it as if it's unreal. There's a professor at Rice University called, his name is Cripple, and he suggested that materialism is only half right. And I think that's true. And one of the things I try to do in this book is not only do I deal across cultural planes, but time as well. In fact, a few traditions I'm discussing in the book are, technically speaking, extinct. And that's because I think traditional people, for example, I draw upon their traditions and early civilizations, but nothing ever really dies in terms of human belief systems. And even though something is dead now, it can return. And in fact, oddly enough, we're getting various neo-pagan developments, reviving dead religions, ranging from Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient Celts, ancient Germanic traditions, and so forth. So, I see we're going to break.
So, Mark, real quick, let's hold the thought right there. We'll come right back here in 2 minutes after our first break. We're going to dive right into this and pick it up right after the 2-minute commercial. So stick with us. You're listening to Inspired Living Radio with Mark and Kim here on OMTimes Radio. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Are you seeking answers to life questions? Would you like to connect to a departed loved one? Are you suffering from pain, stress, or anxiety? Kimberly Thalkin is a tested, certified, and professional psychic, spiritual medium, energy healer, hypnotherapist, and the founder of Love First, where life transformations happen. Love First services support, guide, and empower individuals by connecting them to their highest potential to live a healthier, joyful, and meaningful life that's filled with purpose. All services can be done by phone, Skype, or in person in Encino, California. Please visit lovefirst.info. That's LOVEFIRST.info for more information.
Aloha, my name is Jennifer O'Neill, and I'd like to invite you to come join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time for my show, Spirit Chat. Spirit Chat focuses on simplifying the process of using the spiritual tools and gifts you were born with in a way that fits into your everyday life. I also teach different techniques that will help you learn how to navigate the spirit realm and empower you on your own spiritual journey. So join me this Wednesday as I guide you through the spirit world.
There are many sounds in your daily life. Ones that make you smile. Ones that help you relax. And there are some sounds that can help save lives. Wireless emergency alerts, now on many mobile devices, use a unique sound and vibration to bring you critical information about emergencies in your area. With updates from local sources you know and trust, you can be in the know wherever you are. Learn more at ready.gov/alerts. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Inspired Living Radio with Mark and Kim here on OMTimes, the voice of consciousness. Our very special guest today, Mark Mirabello, talking about part 2 of his book, A Traveler's Guide to the Afterlife. If you weren't able to catch the first episode that aired back in early May, you can always go to iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, SoundCloud, OMTimes Radio Archives, and actually catch that episode, which we like I said, we ran out of time, as we always do on all of our shows, because there's just so much information to cover. So we thought it would be a good idea, based on the questions I received and the interest in this book, of bringing Mark to come back on Inspired Living Radio and talk about part 2 and ask some more questions. If you do want to call in, you can call in right now. We will be taking questions here over our phone lines. You can also go to our Facebook page, which is Inspired Living Radio. Ask to join the community, and we will you can ask your question there. If you're in the United States, the number is only for the United States. That's 1-202-570-7057. That is the OMTimes Radio call-in line. Here in the United States, again, if you're outside the United States, please post your question on our Inspired Living Radio Facebook page. So, Mark, we went right to break. You were talking about time as part of the research that you were doing as well.
Yeah, and by the way, one of the points I tried to emphasize in the book is, I think it's because we're so scientifically advanced. Most Westerners have a relatively simplistic view of what the other side is about. And that's why I tried to explain a wide variety of ideas. Now, to illustrate this point, and again, I'm in no way trying to disparage this point of view, but a really remarkable book some years ago, Life After Life by Dr. Moody, he was collecting near-death experiences, and people were talking about encountering light and basically figures that were benevolent and so forth. But in fact, in Eastern traditions, for example, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, as it's called by Westerners, though that's not really the title, when we pass and experience, in fact, the idea is your physical realm, you'll notice it will sort of disappear. For example, if you're on a battlefield or in a car accident or in a hospital room, suddenly everything disappears. And you're essentially, even without any kind of body, including a dream body initially. I remind people that when we dream, strangely enough, we see each other, we see ourselves, I should say, from a distance. It's as if we're watching a television program. Right now, when I look out, I can see my hands, but I can't really see my own face. But oddly enough, when we dream, we're watching ourselves. Well, in the initial stages of death, everything disappears, and you feel like your kind of consciousness plunged into a sort of absolute existence, if you will. And then that's with you experience the clear light of the void, which is as bright as a million suns, as loud as a million lightning strikes. Now, if the person is properly trained and focused, he will merge with the clear light and escape endless rebirth. But most of us will shrink back. We'll be afraid. And once we do that, there's a secondary encounter with a clear light, although less dramatic. And then we begin a plunge, if you will. Now, initially, the first several days, and the whole process lasts 49 days, initially we will experience what seem to be beautiful entities that are very, again, benevolent and friendly. Now, a Westerner may interpret this as heaven, but in the Eastern tradition, unless you're properly spiritually disciplined and developed, you're actually not in a heaven. And oddly enough, now this is confusing to Westerners, what you're actually experiencing is generated by your own mind. In much the same way a dream is generated by the contents of your mind when you're asleep. Now, when Westerners hear this, they say, oh my gosh, you're saying that the afterlife's not real. No, that's not the case, because in again, in many Eastern traditions, they call this a non-dualist universe. The only thing that exists is thought. In fact, right now, there is no matter energy, we're thinking it. It's all a dream. Mm-hmm. Now, we go through this process, and in fact, the Easterners will say, don't basically be attracted to these benevolent beings, because they're really not there. And you must remain indifferent and calm. And then after several days, you start to see horrific entities that are threatening. Now, once again, Westerners may misinterpret this as they've been damned to hell, but that's not what's happening. These are basically, again, from the content of your mind and things that you've done that are not very nice in your life, and that's where that's coming from, and you must not be afraid of those entities that are threatening. Now, at any point along the 49 days, based on your training and enlightenment and so forth, you can escape into either a pure land or into nirvana, which is ending rebirth. But the whole point is you must be calm, and you must not be attracted to anything or be afraid of anything. And what's really curious in some traditions, such as, again, I'm talking East here, we would consider love a good thing, but in fact, love is actually, if you're drawn to something, it's going to keep you in the cycle of rebirth. So you have to be indifferent to love, indifferent to hate, and also not display ignorance. These are the three poisons. Now, ignorance is thinking that only what we experience here in matter and energy is real. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that this is the tradition, that people should reject, for example, their traditional belief system, but I try to explore and give people a wide variety of notions. Now, you mentioned Swedenborg earlier in the introduction, and that's, again, if people are more drawn to the Christian tradition, that gives Emanuel Swedenborg, an aristocrat, 18th century Swedish baron, gives really detailed descriptions of what occurs. For example, now that's more similar to what Westerners are familiar with. When we die, we will spend up to 30 years in what's called the world of spirits, and that's where you will encounter your parents and grandparents and friends and loved ones. But eventually, you are drawn by your ruling love to what he calls a hellish or heavenly realm. And that he describes it in a really interesting way, because in Swedenborg's tradition, it's not a God rewarding you. He does, of course, believe in God, but the God's not rewarding you, and the God's not punishing you for your sins. But what essentially is happening, you freely choose these realms based on your ruling love. Aleister Crowley, the occultist, once said that he would be miserable in he'd be miserable in heaven because he likes wild women, drugs, and alcohol. And he was saying it would be a boring place. And according to Swedenborg, that's exactly where Crowley would end up, to hell, because, Swedenborg, Crowley would end up in a hellish realm because he would be drawn there. And Swedenborg gives the example of a frog is happy in a swamp with flies and mosquitoes and slime, and he's drawn towards that. And hellish, evil people are drawn towards those places, and loving good people are drawn towards a heavenly realm. So these are, again, wide variety of experiences. I get into Egypt. I get into, you mentioned, for example, the Orpheus traditions. Orpheus, the Orphic cult, actually gave them secret passwords and what to experience when they encounter on the other side to get them into a positive place, which, curiously enough, is found in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have three heavens, and the highest heaven you get if you go through a process of exaltation. You get secret information in the temple to literally make you a god in your own little universe. They believe, although they only worship one God, they believe there are many gods in the universe, and we can become one, according to this tradition. Now, again, most people aren't aware of that because Mormon missionaries always talk about milk before meat, because, again, Westerners tend to have a really narrow point of view. They'd be shocked that perhaps the people in Salt Lake City are talking about becoming gods. But if you have a global perspective of what the afterlife is about, what you can become. It's not at all. In fact, in many traditions, every listener today has already been a god. In Jainism, another Eastern tradition, there are more gods in the universe than there are humans. And we have billions and billions and trillions of lives, and everybody has already done everything. So everybody listening has already been a pirate. Everyone has already been a hero. Everyone has already been a coward and a traitor, a rape victim and a rapist. And we've all been gods. And this will continue on for a long time. I remember in tradition, the Buddha, before he attained enlightenment, allegedly was a god 8 times. Which reminds me, too, because, again, this is often misunderstood in the East. If you look at Hinduism, or I should say in the West, if you look at Hinduism, there always is the god Shiva. There's always the god Vishnu. But what often we don't realize is that different entities become Shiva. If I do something really spectacular, a supreme act of generosity, for example, I could become the god Shiva. The current god Shiva, and again, this is how East tends to view things long term. They believe that being a god ultimately corrupts you because you have endless bliss and power. So typically gods fall in their next life, and they will exist for millions of years, but eventually they exhaust the karma that gets them there, and they fall, and then someone else, in fact.
Interesting. Okay, like I said, this show goes by so darn quick. We're already at our second break, halfway through the show. We're going to go to our next break. We'll be back here in 2 minutes, continuing discussion. Interesting topic, guys. A Traveler's Guide to the Afterlife with our very special guest, Mark Mirabello. Stick around.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Mark Lanehart, the intuitive prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Mark's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Mark's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marklanehart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
America's service members and veterans are strong, forged out of bravery, sacrifice, and duty. Sometimes reaching out for help can be the most challenging and worthwhile mission of all. When you recognize something isn't right, make the call to the Veterans Crisis Line or Military Crisis Line. Dial 1-800-273-8255 and press 1.
And welcome back to Inspired Living Radio. Our very special guest, Mark Mirabello, talking about his book, A Traveler's Guide to the Afterlife. Mark, let's jump right back in. We were talking about Eastern philosophy and religions and belief systems compared to Western. So let's jump right back in and pick up where we left off.
Yes, and by the way, one thing I should mention too, I've always been intrigued by these wide variety of opinions in traditional China, and now again, sadly, the sort of official atheist communist state has been uprooting some of these traditions. But in traditional China, they literally, when people passed away, they were buried with bribe money, so they could bribe the officials in the next side, because they viewed the next side as very similar to this one. And it shows many of us think that we go to this eternal bliss and we float around in pure knowledge and bliss. But in many traditions, it's very similar to this. In fact, we see a widespread notion that, in fact, even Swedenborg, I mentioned before the break, thought this. The next side
the afterlife
here is so similar that people, when they die and, shall we say, are now in the next world, don't even realize they're dead because it's so similar. There's a sky, there's earth, there's fruit, there's trees, grass, and so on and so forth. And again, now we also have in traditions, for example, in Eurasia, this has always struck me as interesting when I say curious, it's a mirror world, so everything's reversed. So, for example, in the shaman traditions of Eurasia, if there's a plague here, there's not one over there. If it's winter here, it's summer there. And it's literally a mirror world. And in many of these traditions, when we go over there, this is again still in the shaman traditions, if we pass away at a very advanced age, and perhaps let's say we've developed some disabilities in the aging process, we arrive there exactly the same. So if we are 95 years old and bedridden and cannot walk and so on and so forth, that's how we arrive there. But here's the good news. Because it's a reverse world, time reverses itself. So when you're on the other side, you grow younger again. Here, every passing day we grow older. There we grow younger. And curiously enough, this idea was found even among the ancient Greeks. And it's an interesting way to view it, because when modern Americans go visit grandmother and she's perhaps lost her memory, she has lost perhaps bladder and bowel control and so forth, she cannot walk anymore, and it strikes us as tragic. But the Greeks said, as the shaman people would say in Eurasia, that she's in the process of turning into a baby again. Babies don't have teeth, they're bald, they can't walk, they can't control their bowels and so forth, but she will eventually have all of this restored on the other side, and she will become, once again, a beautiful young woman. Now, this keeps going, and eventually you become a baby again. So on the other side, you grow younger and younger and younger, and then you re-enter a womb and come back. So it's another cycle. You come here and you age, and you go over there and you are renewed. Gerald Gardner, in the modern revival of witchcraft, Wicca, he actually brought these ideas back in the Western tradition. Of course, he's saying that these were traditional beliefs of an underground religion called witchcraft, but that witches go to a summer land, and they get younger and younger when they're there. Now, he said regular people just go to a regular place where it's very similar to this, but he seemed to view the witches as an elite, and this is often what religious traditions will do. By the way, another interesting idea of Gardner, we always found intriguing, this is called group soul. He said that people that are witches now have always been witches. Every life they come back, they're witches. And they're reborn among the ones they love. That's the group soul part. So, for example, if you have a really dear friend or a spouse, in your next life, you'll be reborn with them as well. But, of course, your positions may change. For example, that person could become a different gender the next life. What is now your wife may become a friend. But you're always born among the people you love, which is an interesting notion. And some years ago, there was a research by a medievalist who claimed that although he was a standard professor, he got it much as myself. He got into the sort of arcane, and he became convinced that he, in fact, had been a medieval Cathar. This was viewed by the medieval church as a heresy, and they were brutally extirpated by not only by Christianity but by Islam, and in fact even by the Chinese. And one of the reasons for that is they thought literally the only hell that exists is right now. We're in endless rebirth, and we, through knowledge, can achieve liberation. But here's where they got into trouble. They thought that the creator of the world was actually the bad guy, so that the God of the Old Testament was not, he thought he was God but wasn't. They called him the blind one. And that's, so in a sense, the Cathars were telling the medieval church and the Pope and all that they were devil worshippers. That's how they got into trouble, which, of course, is often the case when you go after the establishment. It's going to cause some problems. But, again, wide variety of beliefs. And by the way, I should pause because I tend to go on and on. This is when you have professors on. We have verbal diarrhea.
No, it's very interesting stuff. And I was as you were talking, because I use the term Summerland when I'm doing my communications and mediumship, and I know Swedberg talked about the other side as being very similar to our etheric body versus our when we incarnate and decarnate based on either this world or the other world. And I always think of the tree of life as above, so below, that interconnection between what's going on in this world and the afterlife. So I want to get to a few questions and just have you talk through those. One of the questions is that I wanted to talk about, let's see here, other dimensions,
Mark.
And what happens to atheists after they die.
Oh.
Yeah, oh, by the way, I heard her voice.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you, Kim.
Oh, okay. So, Mark, what I was going to say is you were talking about mediumship. This would be kind of interesting because we've heard so many different understandings of what the afterlife is based on different parts of the world and religions, etc. But I wonder if there were mediums, that were communicating with souls that had passed in these particular regions and countries and so forth that Mark is talking about. If their understanding of the messages come through, they be the same, or would you understand the soul communicating based on what you grew up in based on the area you're in? Does that make sense? Like, are the mediums in those parts of the world? Yeah.
To address both questions, and I'll do it in reverse order. Secondly, the dimension aspect, and first yours. There's a worldwide belief when it comes to mediums and basically prophets and shamans and so forth, and we find this universally in traditional cultures, that at one time the gods walked among us here, and the connection to the other side was wide open. And somehow a kind of degeneration occurred, and the doors closed. And what essentially a shaman represents in these cultures is the people that were still able to access the other side. What had once been open to everyone is now open to an exclusive elite. And in many cultures, for example, the shaman is able to do this because he receives special training from an older shaman, although in some cases there's a special selection. People that survive lightning strikes in some traditions become the shamans. But they're the sort of technicians of the sacred. Now, I should also mention on this, because of our Judaic-Christian tradition, we always view, when we hear things have become corrupted, things have declined, we always view this as somebody has committed a sin. This is core to, for example, the book of Genesis. We're no longer in a wonderful place because Adam and Eve fumbled the ball, so to speak. And by the way, in medieval Jewish tradition, they were only there for 2 weeks in Eden before making the big mistake. Now, but in many traditions, especially, again, I keep referring to the East, corruption is a function of time. Again, they view metaphorically that a brand new baby is young and fresh and new, but over time we age, and we become, again, not to denigrate age, because I'm well along the way myself, but we can't run as far, and we don't look as great, and so on and so forth. But they view corruption as a normal process, and it just is a passage of time. And then typically, many of these cultures, so this notion of circular time is mainly an agricultural notion, there's a destruction followed by a renewal. Now, regarding communicating with the other side, for example, the ancient Egyptians used to send letters to the dead. We actually find them in the tombs. And some of them even had openings where, for example, a son would send a message to his father, often asking for a favor, the assistance of the deceased father, because the father now had exalted powers by being one of the dead. So there's this, and of course you also have the special family tablets in China, where after someone passes away, they dedicate a tablet, and that is set up around a shrine in the household, and the family will share information with the deceased father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, and so forth, and also even share joy. If someone gets a job promotion or has a baby, they go through a ritual where they announce to the deceased. Now, one point that has to be really clear on this, though, because, again, it's so complex, if you will. When people communicate with the other side, we have to be very careful. Oops.
And that's okay. We're actually heading into our last break for the show. We'll be back in 2 minutes. I guess we will continue our conversation on people that communicate with the other side. Stay with us.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Join me, Tammy Adams, intuitive life coach and spiritual healer, for my new show, Karma Talk. Learn how to get rid of your karma so that you can start living the life you are meant to live. I am not going to tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Join me on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for Karma Talk on OMTime Radio.
I am Fidel Nsombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Inspired Living with Mark and Kim, and our guest today, Mark Mirabello. So before we went to break, Mark, you were talking about what we need to be mindful of with people that communicate with the other side.
Yes, and by the way, this is why, shall we say, when people if they miss a loved one, they really should communicate first with a professional, as opposed to just trying it in their living room with a Ouija board, because, again, we forget that we need skills, and we must operate correctly. Now, there's a famous case in 1949, Douglas Dean. Now, this will sound very familiar because it was reported at the time in, strangely enough, the Washington Post. It shows how more open they were to these ideas. And to condense the story, a boy was really close to an aunt who was interested in the paranormal and the occult, and she was very ill. He was a 12-year-old boy, if I remember correctly, and 14-year-old, sorry. And when she was passing away, she had a Ouija board purchased for him, and then asked him to continue to talk to her when she had left this plane, which he did, and of course later seemed to show indications of demonic possession. And this story was read by a young man in the newspaper. Blatty was his name, and he would later write the novel The Exorcist, which of course also becomes a noted film. He changes the gender and the circumstance, but it's all based on the story. Now, the point of this is you have to be, you don't play with electricity unless you know what you're doing. You don't play with nuclear power unless you know what you're doing, and this is a similar case. Now, in the original lore in the West, when you talk to the other side, you can't be certain initially that the spirit is what the person that they're claiming to be. That's why in traditional lore, you must get the spirit into a triangle. Now, I'd said this on another podcast that I'd done, and I received all these communications. For some reason, this hit a nerve. And on the original planchette of Ouija boards, and by the way, Ouija boards are not simply a Parker game. We have a version of this goes back to the ancient Roman Empire we know of. Although there they used a pendulum over a board having all kinds of letters and yes and no, but it's the same concept. But the idea was if you can somehow get that entity into a triangle, he will be forced to speak the truth. Now, you may ask, why would they lie? Well, there's a widespread notion there are all these wandering spirits that are confused. They don't know where they are and what they're doing, and they're bored. And they will, that's why, for example, they may pretend to be Cleopatra. They won't say really who they are because they think the person over here will be more intrigued by a fameless person. You also run the risk that the entity will try to inhabit your body. Now, this again would lead to some kind of possession. And there are various techniques to protect against this. For example, being in a circle. That's where the magic circle comes from. It was actually, for some reason, spiritual entities cannot break the circle. So if you stand in one, you'll be protected. And incidentally, in medieval traditions, this is called necromancy, summoning the dead. And in some of the traditions, you're actually awake. You go to a fresh grave in some of these traditions, dig up the person, and the corpse talks to you. Now, in other traditions, a second type of necromancy, again, you talk to someone who's been dead a while, and it's simply the spirit comes through. In some cases, the spirit will fill the body of the medium or the person, the necromantic magician, who will then speak. Now, this concept is found in voodoo. Now, incidentally, when people in the West hear voodoo, because Hollywood's done a bad rap on voodoo, it's actually a religion. Although, since it's so old, and people forget this, we tend to think of a separation between religion and evil things, and good is on one side and evil is on another. Well, in fact, ancient gods, they really didn't have devils, but every god had a dangerous side. And what voodoo is about, you can use it for example, a teenage girl can find love with a high school boy. You can also heal a medical condition with it, but you can also do some dangerous things with it. And there you contact a red sect sorcerer, a boko, he's called, or she is called. Some of them are women. And you know, by the way, you can tell the difference really clearly because in most 98% of voodoo would be the more benevolent kind, and they have a little temple either in a public place or in a house, and everybody is dressed in white, and they're dancing in a clockwise direction, very rhythmic music with drums. A red sect operation will be in the night, in some kind of sinister place where murder has occurred or a graveyard. Everybody is dressed in bright red scarlet. The drumming is syncopated, it's offbeat and very frenzied. And you only consult a red sect magician or sorcerer if you're in dire straits. In other words, you're going bankrupt and going to lose your billion-dollar business or whatever. By the way, one rather curious story. This sounds really so bizarre, it sounds like it's fabricated, but it's true. And in fact, the New York Times even referred to it in the voodoo priest obituary, which ran in the New York Times about a year ago. A young American couple went on honeymoon to Port-au-Prince in the 1970s, I believe it was, and went through a voodoo ceremony with this particular fellow who had just passed away. I forget his name, sadly. But that's actually Bill and Hillary Clinton. And anyone from Haiti would think that's how they became so famous. In voodoo, nobody comes rich and famous and powerful unless they summon some really powerful entity to assist them. And apparently they would then argue that Donald Trump must have got a better LOA, it's called, how he beat Hillary in the election. But the whole point I'm trying to say is communication's interesting, but you have to be really careful. And it's not a game for teenage boys and girls to play in the front parlor. And they have to know what they're, again, consult the professionals. Now, before we run out of time, if I could briefly refer to the original, also the first question, the idea of dimensions, that the dead or elsewhere, the notion of a fourth dimension in space, which is, strangely enough, was really not developed by the human race until the 19th century. George Riemann was a German mathematician who sadly died at a young age, and he first suggested the possibility there's a fourth dimension in space. Now, we're not talking about Einstein, fourth dimension of time, literally another dimension of space, which is inaccessible to us. And what's interesting about this concept, and it's now entered physics, they're now seriously considering not only fourth but also fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions. If this is true, an entity, for example, in the fourth dimension, would actually experience our world the way we think of God's coming here or the dead. For example, we couldn't really see him. If we see him, we'd only see a part of him, and it would appear monstrous. We could lock ourselves into a closed room, and he could appear, part of him at least, in the closed room, even though it's closed. He could watch us constantly. He could hear us. He could speak to us when we think we're alone. And this led to various 19th century Christians to suggest that not only God, but also the dead are in the fourth dimension, that when you die, you simply go there. There's also been the concept that we're now in the fourth dimension part of us right now. The metaphor is used of a tree with leaves. And imagine the tree is the fourth dimensional aspect. And the entire human race, when it's alive, are leaves on this tree, that we're all connected to living people. And essentially death is a leaf falling off the tree. We disconnect from the metaphysical life, if you will, in the fourth dimension. So it's an intriguing notion. And again, but the important sort of concluding remark as we run out of time is you have obviously a select audience here. These are people interested in higher questions. But always try to find as much information as possible. Not simply, do not assume the other side is simple and that the journey there is simple. But always remain self-confident and courageous and calm. And in virtually every tradition, if you remain calm at death, it takes you to a better place.
Wow, isn't that something? My goodness. I mean, that can make your head spin, all of these different ways of thinking about the...
So interesting, though.
Where does the truth reside?
Oh, by the way,
that's yet to be seen.
I should make it clear, and I notice this when I teach classes. Again, it's because of our Judeo-Christian Western tradition. We always want the oneness of truth. And people become almost alarmed when there's a wide variety of paths. The Buddha talked about thousands of different paths to enlightenment. And it's alarming to us. But in fact, consider that there may be multiple routes. For example, just because an Eastern tradition is legitimate doesn't mean a traditional Western tradition is illegitimate. Or again, we talked about Wicca, that tradition is wrong. It's possible there are many different ways, many different paths. And so that's why people should explore the variety and choose the one. One that I never try to, and I don't do this in the book at all, I don't inject my own beliefs at all, and I don't do this when I teach classes. But my own prejudice has always been the idea that the other side will be what we expect. In philosophy, there's this notion of idealism, that everything is idea. We already talked about this as non-dualist thought in the East. that the universe is being created by our minds, if you will, or we're in someone else's dream is also a concept of this idea. But you'll encounter what you expect. So if you want to go to a lovely place of bliss, you'll go there, which is also important. Don't expect some hellish experience, because your fears may generate that. You'll be so afraid it'll happen, it'll occur. And it's also very important, don't be this sort of free-thinking atheist type, because there are many traditions. This is actually found in Tibetan Buddhism. When an atheist freethinker dies, he's actually in a kind of darkness, and because he's still conscious, but he can't believe that he's dead, because he can't believe there's an afterlife. So he thinks he's in some kind of nightmare or some sort of coma. That's a good place.
Oh my goodness! Well, I think what we glean from this, Mark, is to make sure that you're informed, understanding, and seeing what resonates from all of these different aspects of what the afterlife might look like. And we want to thank you for being with us, and thank our listeners. And we'll see you here, same place, same time next week with our guest Tara Mackey. Until then, namaste.
Namaste.